Well, welcome everyone. I'm so thankful to have everyone here today. Um, and this is going to be a wonderful conversation about ministry scheduling with our partners from Ministry Scheduler. Um, we're happy to introduce this program that invite you to learn more about our work at episcopalparishes.org, where we have many of these types of workshops. We recognize that, not everyone has the same experience, so take what you can and leave what you can't. But my name is Laura Manley. My official title here at EPN is administrative resource, but since nobody knows what that means, Joe has told me I can pick my own title for today. So I am wavering between workshop coordinator and like penultimate mugwump of EPN. So it's going to be one of those two. Um, but we're so glad all of you are here and participating today, especially with everything that has been going on, especially across the East Coast and then down in Mexico. A lot of people in Central America, there was a severe Hurricane John down there also. So really quickly, let's just take a minute and offer a prayer for all of our brothers and sisters who are in the path of Helene and other natural disasters around. God, you are in the midst of those who suffer. May all affected by Helene and other natural disasters around the world feel your healing presence. God, you are in the hands of those who reach out. Help responders in their courageous work. God, you are in the hearts of those compassionate ones whose prayers cry out for their families, whose prayers cry out for their neighbors, whose prayers cry out even for strangers. Bless and comfort those who mourn. God, you are the still small voice, the gentle whisper that follows. May your ears always hear. May your hearts always cry out for one another. May our hands always reach out to one another. And may we always walk like you walk, in solidarity with those who suffer, and so reflect your presence and comfort. Amen. So thank you all for being here, especially Reverend Marshall Jolly, whose church and home were right in that path of Helene. So we're so thankful you can be here with us. But I'm going to turn this over to Christina from Ministry Scheduler, and we'll get started. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you so much for the beautiful prayer and the warm welcome, Laura. A big thanks to all of our partners at Episcopal Parish Network for bringing us together. We are so thrilled that each of you could join Emily, Reverend Marshall, and myself today. My name is Krista Coots. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, but I spent the last 15 years in Chicago. My background is in parish ministry and nonprofit work. And a fun fact, while studying for my MDiv, I lived for 3 years in community at Brent House, which is the Episcopal Campus Ministry Center at the University of Chicago, a wonderful ministry under the leadership of the Reverend Stacy Allen, whom some of you might know. So because I've experienced firsthand the hospitality and inclusion of the Episcopal Church, I am so excited to connect with all of you today through EPN and Ministry Scheduler Pro, which we sometimes colloquially refer to as MSP, as you'll hear. We're curious about the geographic spread of those of you on this workshop, and we'd love to meet you and hear where you're tuning in from. Although we can't see you, we can read the chat. So if you would, please take a moment to type the name of your church or your location in the chat box. I'll put mine in too. We're thrilled for you to meet the Reverend Dr. Marshall Jolly soon. You'll hear a lot more about his background and ministry as a rector in the Diocese of Upper South Carolina during the second part of our presentation. For now, I'd love to introduce my wonderful colleague, Emily Lutz from MSP. Emily?
Yes, hello, my name is Emily Lutz. Yes, we are Lutz and Kutz. We know. I live in Haubstadt, Indiana, and I've worked with Rotunda. Gosh, it's been over 5 years now, and every day I get to talk to our wonderful, wonderful customers. But at my parish, I serve as a cantor. I'm a choir member, and I've done that for countless years.
So before Emily and I started working for MSP, we both worked in churches full time with MSP. Emily was serving a church in Indiana, and I was working for a Chicago congregation. That's where each of us discovered and implemented ministry scheduling tools. And MSP is what we found to be an incredible time saver and truly a game changer for scheduling liturgical ministries and staying connected with our volunteers. We are still churchy and techie rolled into one, aren't we, Emily? And we're
Very
so
much so.
excited to share how MSP can make it easy and painless for your church to organize volunteers for worship services. So in this workshop, we will be sharing tips and strategies that every church can benefit from, regardless of the tools that you use. And just one quick housekeeping note, if you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type those into the chat box, which you see on your screen, and we'll make sure to answer those at the end of the session.
Perfect. Thanks, Krista. Hopefully everyone can see the presentation now, and we'll just jump right in. So they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and maybe this is how you're feeling about ministry scheduling. Totally frustrated, overwhelmed, managing those volunteer preferences, making changes to the schedule, and keeping volunteers connected and engaged. It can be challenging. So I want to let you know I completely understand where you are right now. As Krista said, before I worked here at Rotunda, I was the secretary at my parish, and I was in charge of the schedule. So luckily, I inherited MSP when I came into that role. But one day I was chatting with a secretary at the church down the road, and she said, "Oh, it's time for me to work on my schedule again." And it made me think, what do you mean? The schedule is the easiest part of my job. So I introduced her to MSP, and the rest is history. I tell you all this to say I'm here now because I know MSP can make a significant difference, and I want to help make scheduling easier for you.
We'd love to open this up with a question. You will see a Zoom poll on your screen with multiple choice options. Here's the question. What is the most painful part of ministry scheduling for you? Painful can mean frustrating or time consuming. We would love to understand what part of the process you find to be the most challenging in order to better tailor this workshop to your needs. So is the most painful part of ministry scheduling creating the schedule, managing preferences, finding subs, or dealing with no-shows? And if your answer is none of the above, or you want to add some context to your response, feel free to write it in the chat. We'll give it 5 more seconds and then take a look at the results. All right. Thank you, Laura, for sharing the poll. Okay, we have a clear winner. Finding subs and dealing with no-shows is, we can relate to that being a painful part of the scheduling process, and also one of the more painful parts on Sunday or Saturday evening itself, right before prayer is supposed to begin. Thank you for taking the poll.
All right, so painless ministry scheduling. What is it? How do we achieve it? Essentially, there are 3 key elements we're going to look at. Streamline scheduling. We all know creating ministry schedules, it's time consuming, prone to error. So we'll show you how to streamline that scheduling process while easily managing all the pieces that go into making your ideal schedule. Second, strengthen communication. That dreaded reply all email can quickly clutter your volunteers' inboxes and cause frustration. I know it does for me. So we'll show you how to eliminate noise and improve volunteer engagement through communication. Finally, engaging volunteers. When volunteer scheduling needs can't be accommodated, we tend to lose our volunteers and then overwork the old faithfuls. So we'll help you to make it easier for volunteers to get and stay involved. After we go through all that, we'll hear Reverend Marshall's own tips and best practices, and then we'll cover any specific questions you have to wrap up. So let's start with talking about our first goal, easily streamlining our scheduling process. So it's time to ditch the spreadsheets, emails, and notes for a more efficient way of collecting and tracking your volunteers' availability and using that valuable info to build fair and balanced schedules. As we were creating the program to be a solution to help as many churches as possible, we discovered that there are four main scheduling models. So we have self-sign up. Individuals sign up online for spots of their choosing. Rotating or repeating assignments. So teams or individuals are scheduled on a fixed rotation. Manual scheduling. You handpick volunteers for their assignments. And auto schedule based on availability. So generate fair and balanced schedules based on preferences and, of course, your volunteers' availability.
So now we're curious to poll everyone again. You'll see a second Zoom poll question now about what methods you are using to schedule ministry volunteers for Sunday services. How are your volunteers currently assigned to your schedule? You can select self-sign up where your volunteers put themselves on the schedule. Do you schedule by hand or in Microsoft Excel? Do you use MSP or another scheduling software, or none of the above? You can specify that in the chat as well. We would love to know the tools your church is using. We'll give it about 5 more seconds and then see our answers. All right, let's see the responses to the poll. Oh, great, it's a mix. We have
Okay.
self-sign up.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much for answering the poll.
Good to see most people have some kind of scheduling system in place, so that's great. And the good news here is that, let me go back here, MSP does support all four of these models. Okay. So let's go ahead. We're going to jump over to the program here and see what MSP is all about. So right now, this is called the web admin view. Let me just zoom in a little bit so you guys can see. There we go. So this is the web admin view. This is totally web-based. You can access this from any browser. And we're just going to go through the steps of getting started with MSP. We'll do it in this order. So first, I'm going to come over to the ministries pane. A little bit. There we go. So using these features that we have in here, we can accommodate pretty much any ministry setup. So we've got subdivisions that can be used to differentiate tasks within the same role. So most common is for communion ministers, breaking it down, chalice and host, or readers, reader 1, reader 2. We can use titles. Those are most common with like acolytes. If you want to set them up to be experienced or inexperienced, that can be behind the scenes too, so they won't see that on the schedule. You can also set it up like boy, girl, so that you can have a good mix for your acolytes there. And again, all that can be behind the scenes. We can also set ministries to private. So if you wanted to schedule all of your clergy in there, that's a common one that folks set to private, maybe donation counters. And MSP can also be used for ministries that are outside of the liturgy. So I know I've got a few in here like coffee and donuts. I've got my religious ed help in here. It doesn't have to be things that are necessarily taking place at service. Any ministry can be set up in here. Once we've got those ministries, we're going to come down here to service times. So we have options for weekly, monthly, and yearly services. This will define when you want to schedule your volunteers, as well as how many people. So you'll set up, how many of each ministry that you'll need for each of these services. Weekly services, of course, those are used for your weekend. And if you want to do your weekday liturgies as well, those can be set up. And then the monthly ones could be used for if you have a special service that's on a monthly basis, like maybe the youth group hosts a service, or you have a special communion that's only monthly and that requires a different number of ministers. We can accommodate that with a monthly service. And then if I scroll down here, we've got some yearly services as well. So these are for like your holy days, holidays, just special things that are only going to be annually. And we do have the option if the date changes, Ash Wednesday, Lent, Holy Week. If the date's going to change every year, MSP will remind you of that so that you can schedule that accordingly. And then you can easily update your services should your needs change. I know for me, scheduling midnight mass on Christmas, so it's too few or too many ushers at that mass. So it's really easy to go in and make that change year to year. And then for one-time services, those aren't listed here. You can add those on the schedule itself. So weddings, funerals, those can all be done in MSP. And as I said, it's just set up as a one-time service. Once our services are set up, I'm going to come up here to volunteers. You can bring your volunteers into MSP. You can do an import from a spreadsheet. We can add them in manually, or we can use an online enrollment form to bring the volunteers in. But once those volunteers are set up, we're ready to make a schedule. So I'm going to come down here to schedules, and I've got one set up for our presentation today. The minimum length for a schedule in MSP is 1 month, but you can certainly do them longer than that. Most common 3 to 4 month schedules. That's kind of the sweet spot for most churches. But if you're not doing that, totally fine. It's just what we've seen to be a best practice. And we found that that particular timing, 3 to 4 months, gets the best results for volunteers, typically knowing what their personal schedules are going to be 3 months out. And I don't know about you, but I have no clue what I'm doing 6 months from now. So it's less work for the scheduler than having to run schedules each month. And I can't recommend enough letting our famous auto scheduler do the heavy lifting for the bulk of assignments in order to create that fair and balanced schedule quickly. So if we're looking at I've got an October through November schedule here, and you can see I've run that auto scheduler ahead of time. But its job is to place volunteers at the correct ministry for their preferred service times on dates that they're available, all while keeping families grouped, avoiding double bookings. And then, of course, that big one is keeping those volunteers balanced. So it literally takes into account hundreds of factors in order to create this fair schedule. And although it's amazing, the auto scheduler, it's not a miracle worker. And there may be a few spots left empty. So this can happen if there just aren't enough volunteers to fill the number of spots that you have in a particular ministry, or maybe there's just a lot of volunteers aren't available on the same day. That can happen. But you can go in and make any manual adjustments or placements as you see fit before or after running that auto scheduler. It is not set in stone. So they're highlighted in red here. If I come down here, I can see I've got a couple open spots. And we're just going to select this open position. We're going to take the rock here. You can just drag and drop. And doing so, even when you're scheduling manually, you'll be able to accommodate things like family groupings and those away dates. So I can see that the rock is in a family grouping, but he's going to go solo on this one. And we'll assign him just like that. And then we'll see there's an icon that's appeared here. So I'm going to click on this, the repeat assignment. This is where we can set up that rotational scheduling model. So if we wanted him to serve on the second Saturday every month, I can set that up. And when I go to make my next, December, January, February schedule, he will already be placed on that second Saturday. Okay, and then finally for self-sign up, I'm going to scroll down to All Saints Day here. You can leave any assignments just unfilled so that the volunteers can then log in and sign themselves up for spots of their choosing. Really handy for those special services where you want to give volunteers the chance to go above and beyond. So I'm just going to leave these spots all showing as not filled, and then I'll show you in a little bit how a volunteer can sign up. But in general, if you're scheduling, a couple hundred volunteers over a 3-month schedule, utilizing the auto scheduler, of course, it really should only take a few minutes and that's it. You can make any adjustments that you see fit. And then when your schedule is ready, you'll post it online. And keep in mind with MSP, your data is always live and available to you. So your leaders, your volunteers, whenever a change is made, even if it's the morning of, the liturgist, the pastor, anyone could go online and see that most up-to-date version. Okay. So our next goal that we're looking at for making scheduling painless is strengthening communication. And we want to keep communication relevant with our volunteers so they're only receiving info that pertains to them and not being bombarded with emails and texts. So if we go back to MSP, I'm going to go on the main screen here. We're going to go down to the announcements pane. And let's say, we just made a schedule. We're ready to send it out. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a template. But with MSP's announcements pane, we have customizable email templates. Those are available in English and Spanish. You can also send text messages through here. It really is probably my favorite little tool in the program. But let's just say, yeah, I'm ready to share this schedule with our volunteers. So when I pull up this template, you'll notice there's these words in curly brackets. I've got them highlighted here for you. These are tokens, and that's going to work like a mail merge in Word in order to personalize this email for each of your volunteers. So if I click on preview, and let's go down to the rock, just we'll stay consistent here. Whoa, there he is. So when we click on someone's name, we'll see now that info has filled in with his login info. And on this one, it even shows the dates that he's been scheduled right there in the email. And we can click on a couple other volunteers just to see those changes. So after volunteers receive this email, you'll notice like there's a link and login info to the web terminal. So the web terminal is what gives your volunteers 24/7 access to see their schedule, do all that. But let's just go take a look at it. So we're going to switch now to the volunteer view. When they log in, they'll be greeted with a home screen, and you can edit any of the text on here, have a little logo, welcome message, whatever you need here. But if we navigate over to this My Schedule tab, we'll see all those dates that the Rock made it on the schedule, including that one where we manually assigned him. And volunteers can also, see if I've got this open, access any resources that you may have attached to those services. They can access that right from here. And then if we come over to the Full Schedules tab, this is where you can post schedules in a number of different layout options. So I've got the interactive calendar view here, and it's really easy for volunteers to see where they are. Hey, that date's green because I'm on there. But here's where they can also sign up for any of those empty positions. So there's All Saints Day, and you'll notice some of these are grayed out. Those are ministries that this volunteer is not qualified for. So they can't accidentally sign up for something that they haven't been trained for or know how to do. So they can volunteer for things. So he could come in here and say, yes, I can help, and be placed on the schedule just like that. So finally, if we come to that My Profile tab here, volunteers can update and then submit those changes to you from here. This is customizable as well in terms of, if there's something on here that you are not tracking for your volunteers, we can take that off here to streamline it. If you have extra info that you're wanting to track, we can add that. So I've created some custom fields here that, if there's extra info you're wanting, like birthdays or safe environment tracking, we can have fields that the volunteers themselves fill out, or if there's something that you're wanting to track behind the scenes, probably safe environment tracking and training would be behind the scenes. The admin can do all that for the volunteers as well. But I really want to highlight, if we come down here to these can't serve dates and times, this is where they can add in dates that they won't be available for the next schedule. So they can do a singular date. They can do a date range. So yeah, I'm going to be on vacation for 2 weeks. They could even do a repeating pattern. So if the Rock says, yeah, I'm going to be busy, the first weekend of the month, I'll be at the gym, we can set that up. He'll just do that once and that's it. And I really like they can repeat can't serve time every year, especially if it's like, I never want to serve on my birthday. They can set that in one and done. Oh, and as well, the volunteers, if they are in a family grouping, they'll have this option here. So only one member of the family needs to go in with those away dates. Really handy. Okay. So our last goal to making scheduling painless is engaging volunteers, or rather making sure we help volunteers get and stay involved in ministry. So one easy way to make sure people remember their schedule dates is with reminders, and MSP helps with that by automatically sending your volunteers email or text reminders. And from the reminder notification, or you may have already noticed on the web terminal, get back there, volunteers can request a sub. So they can come in here and they can add a personalized message as to why they can't make it. They don't have to, but they can. And then an email is going to go out to everyone that's qualified and available for that position. So your volunteers, they'll be thrilled to say goodbye to phone calls, reply all email chains, and they'll feel empowered to find their own subs and replacements. And best of all, the scheduler gets to sit back and just watch all the changes being made, but they don't have to do anything. So you don't have to lift a finger and those subs find themselves, but you'll still be able to see everything that's going on the schedule. We also have a free mobile app volunteers can download, which allows them to accomplish everything that we saw on the web terminal, just on the app. Admins can use it as well. But the one thing I love about the app is that it sends push notifications as a reminder as well for when volunteers are scheduled, which is great if they miss those other reminders for whatever reason. And then when you're tracking attendance, that should be done easily and accurately. You can use our sign-in kiosk. I've got a kiosk pulled up here. So let me just select a service, and it's just a few simple taps. So you can check somebody in. We can like find a replacement. If somebody's subbing in at the last minute, they can choose to replace that. And then that attendance information is automatically entered into MSP, allowing you to run reports. You can follow up with no-shows, send thank you notes to those that subbed in at the last minute. The sign-in kiosk is available on any internet-enabled device. Most churches use like a spare laptop or an iPad to make an easy check-in station. And you can have multiple kiosks going at once, because I know our acolytes will come in a different door than everyone else. So we can have a kiosk there and a kiosk there. Makes that really easy check-in station. And then finally, recruiting new ministry volunteers, that should be an easy task as well. And MSP, we keep it simple with a customizable online enrollment form. So you'll be able to put the link to this enrollment form on the church website, social media, wherever you need to get the word out. And then folks can come in here, fill out the info, and you'll be able to capture those interested volunteers. You're never going to have another potential volunteer fall through the cracks again. And what I love about this enrollment form is that not only can you get all the info you're wanting to capture, but you can direct volunteers to the ministries where you need the most help. So you can kind of limit what ministries are available here as far as what they're able to sign up for. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, like, I don't want everybody going online and making changes without the scheduler knowing about it. And don't worry, MSP is fully customizable for your needs. So you'll stay in control of everything. If you don't want musicians, for example, to be able to request subs, you can turn off features just for specific ministries. And you're also able to assign leaders to help out and give them access only to the privileges that you specify. MSP, it's not a cookie cutter program. You choose how you want to use it for your church. So there's there's a lot more to this. So I'm going to take just a few minutes before we wrap up to tell you about a few ways you can get started with MSP. We do have a free 30-day trial for you to experience the program and how it can make scheduling painless. We'll also provide a walkthrough to ensure all your questions on setup and rollout to volunteers are answered. And then all of the trial data will be retained if you decide to purchase. So we do encourage you to take that 30 days to really get everything set up and see how it's going to work for you. However, you don't have to start with a trial. If you're ready to purchase, it's a 6-month subscription to get started. Your subscription fee depends on the number of volunteers you'll have in the program, as well as which edition you purchase. We have the online and plus edition. Both function exactly the same way and include mobile and web-based scheduling access. Plus edition just has a few extra features, some of which I touched on in the presentation today, but we're happy to help you decide which edition would be best for you and your church. So we do have churches scheduling anywhere from 25 up to 1,000 volunteers. You might find that maybe your church is looking for a solution for only a few ministries right now. We do recommend to start small, get comfortable, and expand your subscription anytime. I've had many churches say they started with a couple ministries in MSP. Word gets around, and then volunteers in those other ministries will approach saying, "Hey, when do we get in on that program?" So after using that program for 6 months, you'll then renew your subscription annually, and your subscription includes all updates to the program, all web features, access to the mobile app, and finally unlimited support with our amazing tech support team. Getting started, it's risk-free. We offer a 6-month money-back guarantee. So if you find MSP is not a good fit, you can receive a full refund. To put that into perspective, if you purchase now, you can road test MSP through March, covering the holiday season, to be sure that MSP is the right solution for your church. And I want to end by saying, our users tell us MSP doesn't feel like just another budget expense, but it actually brings real value to their church by helping them save time, by streamlining that scheduling, strengthening communication with volunteers, and growing participation so volunteers stay involved for the long haul. We do have a special promo code for this EPN workshop that will get you a 10% discount on the purchase price. I think we're going to drop that code in the chat as well, so hang on to that. And we'll send it in a follow-up email as well. If you do have any questions or want an exact quote, go ahead and put your information in the chat box, and we'll connect you with one of our MSP reps today. Oh, Krista, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm speechless by how much I learned even after using MSP for 12 years. When we asked the Reverend Marshall Jolly to join us for this workshop and share his firsthand experience using MSP, he enthusiastically agreed, and we are so grateful. So I have the pleasure of introducing the Reverend Dr. Marshall Jolly, who joins us today from South Carolina. You can read about Reverend Marshall's background on your screen. He is originally from Paris, Kentucky. And in addition to his impressive credentials, he enjoys running, reading, and cooking. He's also a novice tennis player. I just learned he was a soccer coach for the NCAA, and he recently took up golf in an effort to become more patient and humble, which I think is something we can all appreciate. So Reverend Marshall, we're delighted to partner with you on this workshop, and thank you for being here.
Well, you demoted me. I was a referee, not a coach.
Oh, sorry about that.
I won't take it personally.
That's so funny. Could you please begin, Reverend Marshall, by briefly describing the community at St. Thaddeus Episcopal Church, specifically who makes up your staff and what are the demographics and size of your congregation there?
Sure. St. Thaddeus Episcopal Church is the oldest structure in Aiken, dating back to 1842. It's surrounded on all sides by a historic graveyard. The parish itself is very diverse in terms of worship style, age, all of those kind of traditional markers. We worship between 200 and 250 people on Sundays. Sundays are not our biggest day for worship, however, because we have a parish day school that is pre-K through 12th grade. And so Wednesday chapel is where all 400 of our students come and worship in our church for chapel as well.
And how did you first get introduced to Ministry Scheduler Pro, and what drew you to use it for your church?
So I actually learned about Ministry Scheduler Pro while I was serving another parish in Western North Carolina about 6 or 7 years ago. And I remember vividly, Krista, sitting at my desk, which looked like that screen that Emily showed at the beginning of the PowerPoint presentation with like half a dozen different schedules for different things going on, from coffee hour host to Eucharistic minister to lector to, being an acolyte, and seeing people serving coffee hour and being a lector and being an acolyte and being a Eucharistic minister and being an usher, all scheduled on the same day because no two people wrote the different schedules and weren't communicating with each other, and sitting there like, how in the world is this going to work? And then my parish administrator at the time walked into my office and said, oh, here's the mail, which is a rare thing. She never brought me the mail, but on that day she chose to set it on my desk, and on top was a flyer from Ministry Scheduler Pro, manna from heaven, that was really literally dealing with the issues that I was having, saying, are you overwhelmed by scheduling? Are people not communicating? Is this really inefficient? Is this a waste of your time? Yes, 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 and yes. And so 7 years and 2 congregations later, I am an enthusiastic banner waver for Ministry Scheduler Pro.
That is a wonderful story. Could you share, I know you touched on this a little bit, but could you share some of the specific challenges you've faced with scheduling worship ministries before using MSP, and how the software helped you overcome some of those challenges?
Well, one thing, we had different ministries scheduling different ways. So some people would schedule it with paper and pencil, come into the office, make copies, and send those schedules out via snail mail, so that by the time it got to you, you'd already missed your first Sunday trying to be on the schedule. We had about 6 people in my first parish where I used Ministry Scheduler doing different schedules, and they weren't communicating with each other, and there was no sort of method to their scheduling at all, and people would just get overwhelmed and frustrated and not show up. And these volunteers, whose heart were in the right place, they thought they were taking work away from our parish admin, were actually making it harder, because when they don't show up, whose job is it to find replacements? The clergy. When they are overscheduled, whose job is it to figure that out? The parish administrator, the parish staff. And so Ministry Scheduler gave us a central place where we could do all of this at once, and all the ministries were communicating with each other. And the great thing, at least back when I started with Ministry Scheduler, probably 2017, 2018, was even for people who were just stalwart, they hate their computer, they don't know how to use it, they're not going to learn, how dare you introduce the parish to a new electronic program? It gives you a workaround so that they continue receiving their schedule in the mail as if nothing ever changed. But from an administrative perspective, it just made everything light years easier.
Thank you. Those are some great points and great examples. What are some general best practices for managing and scheduling volunteers in worship ministries, regardless of what tools that you use?
So we actually schedule shorter lengths of time. I know Emily said, 3 to 6 months. We find, especially with our acolytes, most of whom are 18 or younger, they don't know what they're doing next week. And so we schedule in 2-month increments so that people can have a little bit more realistic expectation for knowing when they're available and when they're not. I would say figure out what that looks like for your parish and act accordingly. For us, we tend to schedule just about everything through Ministry Scheduler, including pop-up services like funerals. And we'll build the service and then send an email saying, so-and-so has passed away. The funeral is going to be on this day. If you're interested in available serving, go onto your schedule and sign up. That way, while we're working with the family and planning for the service in that short window of time, Ministry Scheduler is working behind the scenes to get volunteers. And so we like some of the things that happen behind the scenes. As you said, watching people, once we drop the schedule, watching people make swaps and subs and that sort of thing. And you go through and you count, okay, there are 8 or 10 swaps here or there. That was at least 24 phone calls that we didn't have to make, and emails that we didn't have to make.
In your experience, how has MSP impacted volunteer engagement and participation in your church's worship ministries at St. Thaddeus?
Greatly decrease the number of missed services by volunteers. And that really is, as Emily said in her great presentation, really due to how the system goes out of its way to not only remind you, but gives you the ability to be reminded in the way that is best for you. So some people want to be reminded the morning of, some people want to be reminded 3 days before. They can set those things up themselves. And then, as you said, you also have the push notifications. We don't use the text message feature in our parish because we haven't needed it, but that is a great add-on that you can definitely use if that's helpful for your context.
And thinking big picture, can you share some tips on how to build a culture of service within a congregation?
Yes, I think that one of the things that Ministry Scheduler does that I was afraid to use at first, and then I started using it, I was like, why did I not always use this? It gives you the ability to mark those people who have not shown up to a service and send them a gentle, loving reminder that part of being an adult is taking responsibility for your own learning. And when you send that one time to an individual and it's transformative in how they're like, oh yeah, I've got to take responsibility, or they'll say, I need to pull back or something like that. So I think the feature that I like the best in terms of creating a culture of service and fellowship is that, gentle corrective of, we missed you, hope everything's okay. Remember, here's Ministry Scheduler, here's how it works, here's where you can get a guidebook if you have questions, that sort of thing. That almost always opens up a pastoral conversation with someone that is really wonderful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how do you approach training new volunteers to ensure that they feel confident and supported in their ministry roles at your church?
I told our parish when I came to St. Thaddeus a year ago, we started using Ministry Schedule within 2 months of my arrival because it's a much bigger system, and they really just badly needed something around scheduling to make everything work a little bit easier. I told the parish, if you can order a pair of socks on Amazon, you can use this program. If you can update your Facebook profile picture, you can use this program. And showed them, and the way that we rolled it out was we had the usual schedulers go ahead and run the scheduler and then, or do the schedule their normal way. And then we uploaded it into Ministry Scheduler so that they got used to using Ministry Scheduler with the schedule that they already knew about. And then we said, okay, in 2 months, when the next schedule comes out, it's going to be completely reliant on the system. And I invited those key leaders who were making the schedule to be administrators so that they could look at the schedule before it went out. And they might know that Carl spends 3 months in the summer in Connecticut. And they may know that Betty Sue has a standing brunch appointment with her daughter every 5th Sunday, things that the system's not necessarily going to know, and can kind of help build and teach the system those peculiarities of the place. I honestly had zero problem doing more than about a 15-minute tech session with about 95% of our parishioners. And those ones that I did have a little bit more of a problem, for them figuring out how to use it, they were really willing to come and learn and be walked through and reminded and that sort of thing. We don't in the beginning push the app because it's more difficult for most of our folks to use the app than it is to use their computer. But as people learn the system, we do point them to the app as another place to use that.
And out of curiosity, in addition to training your volunteers to use the technology of MSP, do you hold like recurring annual or quarterly training sessions for new parishioners to like get involved as a new minister in your worship services for the first time, to receive the training that they need in particular ministries in the sacred space?
Yeah, we do. We have a customary for all of our ministries. It's a one-page like guide to procedure sort of thing. And we actually, that feature that Emily showed you with the dashboard where you have, when you log in, this is what you see. Right there, we have links to that customary where if you're a lector for the first time, you can click the customary, one page, there it is. So that's something that we do, but we also do in-person walkthroughs and trainings and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. As you think about the year as a whole, there's clearly some busier seasons than others. How do you keep your volunteers motivated and engaged to serve, especially during a busy or challenging liturgical season or time of year?
One of the things that we do, we have a host of people who will do a ministry, but they want to be substitutes only. So they don't want to be doing it every week because they're also really committed to Sunday school or they're really committed to this other thing. We ask them to step up during those seasons and be scheduled for those special services. And what we find is they have missed it. They haven't been scheduled because they're only down to be scheduled as a sub, and they really enjoy serving. And it also gives a little bit of relief to those who are regularly scheduled for those services. We tend to schedule for so take Holy Week, for example, or as you mentioned, Emily, that midnight mass, which is always a killer. We tend to let the schedule run for those things. And what we find is people who normally wouldn't go to that service, if they get scheduled, they come and they fall in love with it. And they say, next year, I really want to do this again. For some of the smaller services, so like for Holy Week, we have a service Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night before the Triduum begins on Thursday. We don't schedule those. We tell people there they are. If you would like to schedule, go schedule, and people will sign up on their own.
Mhm. That's really helpful. Can you share feedback that you've received that from volunteers about their use of MSP?
Yeah, the feedback that we've gotten has been really tremendous. I mean, what we find is we started this program by only using it to schedule acolytes and our Eucharistic ministers. And then the next week we schedule, or the next term, I should say, we scheduled more ministries. And what we found is we had ministries coming to us saying, hey, we see what you do for all of these other ministries. We think our ministry would really benefit from being on Ministry Scheduler Pro. So now our altar guild's on there, our flower guild, our nursery. We have recently, we just added our coffee ministry. So
That's really helpful. Which features do you find the most beneficial for managing the unique needs of Episcopal worship services?
well, hardwired into Ministry Scheduler Pro is the ability to use the Episcopal lectionary. I think that is great so that the schedule actually names the services correctly so that when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, wow, this is a feast day. So we need to maybe schedule a thurifer, schedule more crucifers, or that sort of thing. And I also think it's helpful to have that request sub option and that connecting of families. So where, if you have a family of 4, that pretty much can cover a service. So those are helpful features from the administrative side.
Thank you so much. And then last question from me, what advice would you give to other Episcopal churches that are considering adopting MSP for their worship ministry scheduling?
Do it. Do it. It will pay for itself in terms of the administrative capital you will save, in terms of getting people to commit and automatically be reminded. You will do this and will not go back.
Thank you so much, Reverend Marshall, for graciously sharing your insights and for being available to answer our questions today and for being open to connecting with our panelists around their questions too. We did put Reverend Marshall's email address in the chat if you'd like to reach out to him directly. He was very kind and is open to those continued conversations. And now we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions about scheduling ministries, whether it's MSP or something more general about liturgical ministries that we or Reverend Marshall can help you with, please feel free to type those into the chat. I'll give us a moment to review your questions. I did see one come in. Maybe Emily, you can take this one. There was a question, do volunteers and leaders get notified when things change in MSP in the schedule?
Okay, it depends on what it is. I'd say for the most part, if it's like, hey, we're gonna have a service on this day, a lot of those things are not automated, but it's really easy to let volunteers know of the change through that announcements pane that we looked at. One example I would say is like, at least at my church, we do self signups for all of our holy days. So if I add a holy day into the program and I'm ready for signups, I'll send out an email through the announcements pane saying, hey folks, I need these ministries covered. Here they are. They can sign up right from that email. The sub requests, I mean, all that stuff is automated. There's an automated email that goes out for if there's still positions up for grabs. So it's kind of a mixed bag as far as if it's going to be automated or not. But either way, it's really easy to communicate any changes to your volunteers.
And then the admins and the leaders can see all those changes among volunteers as they're taking place too.
Right.
That there was something Reverend Marshall said, there's like a pastoral benefit to being able to see when volunteers request subs and are covering for each other. Like if somebody is ill or is experiencing an emergency, they have an option when they put a sub request out, I can't make it to my assignment, something happened. They don't have to share what happened, but if they do, Reverend Marshall or any of the leaders can see that notification. And for some leaders, that is the opportune moment to be reaching out to dedicated, faithful volunteers about, just letting them know that we're here for them too. So that's an example of being able to see those.
Yeah, and I would give another example too, as far as when you're just collecting availability, volunteers can send in just a comment to the scheduler, hey, I'm having surgery. You're going to have to take me off the schedule for 6 months, those kind of things. And then you can reach out to those volunteers directly and still have that personal touch. But the program does make it easier to keep track of all that.
Yeah, and I will say too, this just happened to us when we put out the October-November schedule. We had somebody within a day of putting out that schedule request subs for all of their positions. They need a phone call. Something's going on with them. And in this case, it was a great conversation. The person was having some vertigo and was just not sure they were going to be steady on their feet and wanted to take a break. But that is a time, if you see that screen light up in yellow, pick up the phone.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. We have another question that came in from Jeremy. He asks, is there a way for acolytes to check in before Mass?
Yes, and I did cover this very briefly, but we've got that sign-in kiosk. So that's a really simple way for volunteers to check in. And you can use that just for specific ministries. So if you're only needing to track attendance for acolytes coming in, you can set it up for that. They can check themselves in, and then you'll have all that attendance data for reporting in MSP.
Great, thank you. And we have a question from Bradley. Do you have an easy how-to video for volunteers who are just starting to use MSP?
Yes, so it is included in that introductory email that we kind of looked at in the announcements pane. We've got a video, we've got a printable guide specifically for volunteers on how to use the web terminal. We have a separate video on how to use the mobile app. It's a short video from the volunteer's perspective. Once they get their login credentials, they'll be up and up and running. It's very easy to use from the volunteer side of things, but we've got those guides in place. And then we do recommend hosting some kind of volunteer training night. I know Reverend Marshall mentioned having a volunteer training as well, but it doesn't have to be anything formal. Even if it's just a space to get together and let your less tech savvy folks have a little assistance, like getting the mobile app downloaded. We've seen churches have a lot more success rolling out whenever they do host something like that.
I had Login Sunday when I started using MSP about 12 years ago, where
Oh,
I
that's
sent
cute.
an email and I brought my laptop and I sat on a folding table on the sidewalk in front of church, and anybody could come and I could pull up my phone and the laptop screen and help people update their profiles and just be available to answer questions. One more question that came in. Can I get a demo of this for my rector to see, Emily?
Absolutely. We can do a personalized demo. And I think Krista shared it earlier. I'm sure we'll share it again. There's a link to our reps calendar, so you can sign up for a time that works best. You can invite people to join. We can jump on a video call and demo the program for you. You can answer any questions, and we'll tailor that to specific features that you're needing or specific setup questions that you'll have.
Another common question is, if there are multiple coordinators for each Sunday service, can they all be in the system at the same time?
Yes. I was what I refer to as a lone wolf scheduler, but that is not common at all. There's often, multiple schedulers in there. They'll have multiple leaders set up, and everybody will be working in the same system. So yes, we have that web-based access as well. So, folks can access this. Not that you would want to, but you have the capability of scheduling from your phone. So that's good from the app. But yes, multiple schedulers. And it looks different for every church. I'd be happy to jump on a call and go over specifics of what would probably work best. I think the typical setup is generally one person overseeing things, as far as like one person running the auto scheduler and then others jump in, but every church is different.
Thanks, Emily. Any other questions? Feel free to drop them in the chat. And if there are no other questions, we do We'll share our email addresses, and you can sign up for a one-on-one call, and we're happy to talk in detail about what would be helpful for your congregation. Thank you all so much for coming. We hope you've enjoyed this opportunity to learn some ministry scheduling tips from MSP, and we've certainly enjoyed connecting with you here and would love to stay in touch. You will be getting a recording of this presentation soon, which you can share with your rector or others in your congregation who might be interested. And we'll be sure to send information about the free trial and the special discount code that is available to everybody who attended this workshop as well. Thank you, Laura, for welcoming us. Thank you to Joe at Episcopal Parish Network as well. And a big thank you to Reverend Marshall for sharing your wisdom and experience in ministry with us today.